Hi everybody. I'm live now. We're live with Judi Daykin. I'd messed up before. I'm very sorry. Um, she's going to start us off with an introduction to herself in a book after she's finished laughing at me.
And at myself as well, because I'm not technologically adept in any way, shape, or form. And I admire you guys for the things that you're able to do. I really do.
Well, not so, in this case.
Well, that goes with the territory, I'm guessing. Yeah, occasionally. So, hi everybody. So, I'm Judi Daykin, and I'm the author of the DS Sarah Hurst books, featuring my Detective Sergeant Sarah Hurst, who's a member of the Norfolk Serious Crimes Unit for Norfolk Constabulary, and they're all set in Norfolk. They deal with some quite gritty crimes, with crime gangs and that kind of thing. But what they do is deal with them in a rural context for the most part. So they involve things, the sort of crime that you might associate with farming or county lines gangs, and in the last case, the theatre on Cromer Pier in book 3. And there's a reason why I picked that particular one, which I'm happy to go into in a minute. So that's me, and that's my baby is DS Sarah Hurst.
So I read one. I've still only read book 1, despite book 2 being sat on my Kindle. I'm very sorry. And book 1 was really good. But I don't know why in my head I expected, and I think it's maybe because I follow you on Facebook and things like that it was going to be a really nice, cozy read.
Well,
so I downloaded it. So going, this is going to be great. It's going to be like cozy crime and Norfolk. Yeah. I'm going to love it. And then I was like,
I couldn't tell you where all that came from. If you looked on any of my pages or my website or anything, you'll see that I did the MA in creative writing at the UEA. That's how I got into writing at all. And I specialised in crime fiction on that course. And when I went on the course, when I joined the course, I was absolutely convinced that I would write something similar to books that I love, like Agatha Raisin, kind of comic, cozy, body in the library, quiche of death sort of type thing. And I honestly thought that is where I would end up, maybe with a slightly darker edge. If I had to pick a golden age writer that I loved, I would say Dorothy L. Sayers rather than Agatha Christie. So out of that grouping, I would say I leant slightly more towards the women-driven fiction and that style, which can be a little bit more explicit, but certainly not not a sort of Kathy Reichs type thing. And when I started writing, it became apparent that many years of watching horror films and reading Gothic novels had rubbed off on me, and that what I'd become interested in was actually the dark side of things. And I was completely shocked at myself when that all started to come out. And my tutor, who's an author called Tom Benn, who writes about Manchester in the 1980s and the crime gangs and things in Manchester, I was really grateful that out of all the tutors I could have got, he was my sort of personal tutor, because he helped me unpack that sort of slightly more tortuous, dark side of my imagination, really. So better that it comes out in the books than it comes out in real life, probably. Yeah. So yes, I was surprised. Honestly, I thought I would write, veering on the hopefully amusing, cozy stuff with it, maybe with a slight twist. And then I ended up heading off after crime gangs and villains of the first water and people shooting people and modest graphic. I hope I'm not so graphic that it's unenjoyable. I try not to make it gratuitous. I try to make sure that it actually is necessary within the plot.
Yeah, it's not gratuitous. and it is well handled, like the topics that you pick. So obviously the first one you sort of touch on gangs and things like that are
Mm,
quite, even though the tough topics are well handled, I would
mm,
say.
mm.
So like
Oh, yeah.
a sort of a place you wouldn't go, do you think? Like a topic you wouldn't cover?
Yes, I think so. I think I would. In terms of topics, then I think that there is a certain amount of latitude you can give yourself, but in terms of actually describing certain things, there are certain things I wouldn't describe. Um, and everyone knows you can never hurt a dog. That's not allowed. Um, or a cat, in my case, because I'm a cat person. Um, so I think there are subjects that maybe you can address or approach, quite heavy subjects, but it's maybe not necessary to describe them in absolute detail for people to know what you're talking about. I haven't considered, for example, anything to do with child abuse. I think that is something I really, it is maybe a subject that needs talking about, but maybe my books are not the place to do that. Or if I did get involved in it, then it would be done in a way that was sufficiently subtle for the reader to know that's what you're suggesting, but that you wouldn't get a scene where it was described in any kind of detail. I think that's there are certain things that I think don't make for entertainment really, and entertainment is what we're after at the end of the day.
So tell us a little bit more about Sarah, your main cat, because she's great as well.
Oh, good. I'm glad you like her. Well, basically, Sarah has a mixed heritage background. So her mum is the daughter of a Windrush generation family that's come from Jamaica, and her father was a white Cockney, basically, and they got together and were a loving couple. But unfortunately, in the 1980s, late 1980s, but unfortunately, they as a couple weren't. Um, that relationship wasn't encouraged on either side. So unfortunately, they broke up. And Mum brought up Sarah on her own, partly with the help of her own parents, her grandparents. Um, and Sarah's grown up in Tower Hamlets, knowing that she has this background, but knowing nothing about her father. And at a very early stage in the first book, she's accidentally come across some love letters from her father to her mother, and she wants to go and try and find him. So she sets off on this kind of journey to physically try and track him down. And all she knows is that these letters have been posted in Norwich. So that's she knows that and from the contents of the letters, that he's gone up to Norfolk to work for Norfolk Police. He's a policeman himself, and that for whatever reason, her mother has chosen not to go with him. So she's chosen to stay with her own family in London and bring up Sarah there. So Sarah's got into the Met. She's qualified as a detective, and she takes a posting in Norfolk Police to essentially, really for her own purposes. So to use that opportunity to get up here and see if she can track her dad down. So that's her kind of personal background. That's why she's come up here. Well, I say up here because it's where I live as well. Um, and and basically, part of the story is to do with how will she find him, and if she finds him, will they, how what will transpire? What sort of actions will he want to know her? Will she want to know him? Um, and I can't really say much more about the resolution of that without giving stuff away. But that's the personal journey that Sarah's going on.
No, there are lots of questions that I would ask you, but I'm trying not to give
Too much away.
too much away. And it's
Yeah.
really hard because there's a lot of really interesting stuff, but I was like, I can't say that. I don't want to give away a spoiler.
Well, basically, she gets up here and she is not treated particularly well by her colleagues when she first arrives, because they think somebody in the current team should have got the promotion, and she's got the promotion. She's an outsider, she's come in. And so she starts coming across hostility within the team, and also from some of the locals up here. So because partly because she's an outsider, partly because she's a woman, and partly because of her background and heritage. So all those things kind of build up for her. And on the very first day that she's got to the police headquarters to join the team, they find a body in a ditch on a farm. A farm worker's out, and he finds this body in the ditch. It's been there several days, and it turns out to be confirmed as murder. And they set off to investigate the murder of this stranger in the ditch, basically. So that's book one.
There's a comment when Sarah starts working, because they're talking about the types of crimes and things like that.
Yeah.
And the nature of being in Norfolk that really resonated with me, about the fact that, like, one of them's been there so many years and he's still an outsider.
Yeah. I mean, I've lived in Norfolk now since 1981, so 41 years. And it's not 3 years since somebody said to me, "It's so good of you to come down here to work in our theatre like this," because I still carry some of my northern accent with me. And I think you never quite settle in, but it's worth every effort that you make, because actually the locals are lovely people when you get to know them. And it's a beautiful place to live. It's a fantastic place to live. And it has so many wonderful things, and great beaches, great walking. It's absolutely fantastic if you like that style of life. And Norwich is a very vibrant city as well. If you want that kind of city life, there's theatres, there's nightclubs, there's loads of stuff going on. But the locals are quite they're fond of their own company. And being a northerner, as you would know, we're very sort of happy to kind of just wander in and out of each other's houses, aren't we, and go, "Oh, come round for coffee," and things like that. It takes a little while to get to know Norfolk people and to get to that point with them. And so it is difficult to make new friends here to begin with, but it is worth the effort, because they're such lovely people when you do get to know them. It's a fantastic place to live. They're just more private, I think, maybe than we in the north. Maybe we interfere with each other, each other's lives too much. I don't know.
Yeah, I have an East Anglian mum, and it does happen. Like, I've been down a lot, and you get you got a nice accent.
Yeah.
Where are you from? And then you don't really get a lot more conversation.
And I do think it's a privacy thing. It's not that they're being difficult. It's just that they are very private people. And it does take you a while to settle in. And as you follow Sarah through the books, actually, she becomes very friendly. She moves into a cottage in a tiny village that's literally just down the road from me, that I chose to place her in. It looks like Happisburgh on the page, but you say Haysborough. And she's got to know her neighbour, her elderly neighbour, Jilly. And as the books progress, Jilly sort of starts to take a little bit more part in her life. And Jilly's a local lady, and she almost sort of adopts Sarah as her, as a sort of surrogate niece or something like that. And she makes sure she's all right and keeps popping in and bringing her cakes and things. So that's an intergenerational friendship that I hope crosses a nice boundary as well. Yeah.
Do you use real places in your books? Are they all real places, or?
Some of them are composites, and some of them are real. So Haysborough's real. The cottage that Sarah moves into doesn't exist. So that row of cottages is kind of fantasy. But the village is real, and the lighthouse and the pub are real. Some of the times I will sort of pull names together, because if I'm going to put a murderer in your street or in your town, maybe it's not nice if it's, you think it might be your road or something. So sometimes I'll kind of shunt names together to invent little villages or little towns. But real places are real places. Norwich, I did try to describe accurately. Cromer and Cromer Pier, where book 3 is set, is about 90% accurate. I think I conflated 2 cafes or something and put them all in one place, and changed a couple of street names just to protect the innocent, as they say. But Cromer itself and the descriptions of the town and the beach and everything are all accurate. So I like to get that sense of place. I like to get that as accurate as I can. But, being aware that I live here and these people are my neighbours, and I don't want to posit a murderer in my friend's house. That wouldn't be kind.
So as an actor, I'm going to ask you one of our group favourite questions, because I feel like you're going to have an answer to this. Have you ever acted out a scene from one of your books as you've been writing it?
No, not actually. In my head, for sure. And I think my books are fairly heavily dialogue driven, because I've been an actor, and so dialogue matters a lot to me. And in my head, I can sort of see them playing out like, I don't know, like an episode of Vera or something, or Wallander or something like that. And I cast people in the parts. I cast real actors in my head are playing the roles. So from that point of view, I suppose I draw on my acting. But have I ever gone out and acted something out? No, I would say not.
So who plays Sarah?
Oh well, I don't think that would be fair. I've had a number of ladies, including one of my ladies who read the second book of Tantor Audio, who would be a potential. But yeah, I don't think it's fair to say that, because I don't want anyone to be upset by it. But I do have some quite specific actors in mind, in my head. And quite often, I think, because I'm a little bit older, they tend to be actors that I've known for a long time that would maybe now be a little bit old for that part. But in my head, they're still Nina Sasanya is the first person that I had in my head when I started writing Sarah. But I mean, I don't know that she would want to play a 33-year-old detective at this juncture in her career. So, but there have been various people as well. I mean, initially, I suppose he's never going to find out. So I could say that D.I. Edwards was Ken Branagh in my head to begin with. But that was because I watched too many episodes of his version of Wallander, I suspect. So that was where that came from. Yeah, and I've cast myself, of course, on a number of occasions. I'm in each of the books somewhere. So
Oh, nice.
You never know your luck.
So have you sort of written yourself into all of the books, like a little walk-on part, or?
Well, yeah, like an Alfred Hitchcock sort of moment, yeah, or a Colin Dexter moment in Morse. Yeah, I mean, if I think I've written a part for myself at all, then it's Aggie, the civilian admin, who doesn't actually turn up till book 2, because they're very short-staffed in book 1. That's part of the point, that the team is under pressure because they're short-staffed. And she turns up in book 2, and she's a 50-something cake baking lady who's a whiz on computers, which I'm not. And so I suppose if I had myself as an ongoing part, then that's probably it. But if you get to book 3, Brutal Season, you'll find a character in there that is actually me. So it's a job that I did. So it was a job I did in the theatre in Cromer, the Pavilion Theatre in Cromer, for about 4 or 5 years. So, and she's called Jessie Dobson, uh, for the very straight up reason that it's me, really. I mean, these things that happen in the book never happened to me, but thank goodness. But yeah, she's one of the ongoing potential witnesses to what happens in book 3.
Is that why you chose to use that particular pier and theatre?
Yeah, because I knew it, and I knew I could give you know, a really accurate kind of sense of what it was like to work there and be there for such a long summer season like that. And the whole idea for book 3 came out of actually a very simple thing that happens when you this is not the simple thing that happens, but when you get into your 50s and you're an actor, if you're not already famous, work gets a lot scarcer for us ladies. And so I trained myself to be a sound engineer or a sound mixer, live sound mixer, and got a job at Cromer Pier doing that for the variety shows in the summer. And there's a thing that all the sound technicians do, because everyone wears head mics, as you may or may not know. When you're singing in a theatre like that, you will be mic'd up, as they say. So you would have a head mic, and it goes to a backpack that's hidden underneath your costumes. And any musical you go to see, that will be the case. And it's not really to do with projection, it's to do with mixing all the sounds together. So my job was about mixing the sound feed and the actors' voices and mixing them all together. So that's what I did. So one of the things you always do at the beginning, before the show starts, while everyone's waiting to go on, you do what you call a line check, and you have an interfere button. You sit there with your headphones on in the sound booth, and you click on each individual mic to make sure that it's working. And you only hover for maybe a second or 2 seconds to make sure it's not crackling, it's turned on, everything's okay, and then you move on to the next person. But you can hear some unholy things when you do that. Opera singers warming up in full flight is a nice one. Someone going to the toilet, not so nice. All these things have happened to me. And it occurred to me that actually it's then a very easy way to listen into other people's conversations. So, and although in practice all the performers know that you do it, most of them either forget, or you're on the line so very briefly that you're not going to hear anything. And it's a matter of trust that you don't linger and listen to conversations, but you can. And I thought, well, what if she overhears something during that process? And that was the spark of the whole idea for the book, was that she suspects something, so she listens in on purpose. She listens in on purpose to a conversation, and she really doesn't like what she hears, and then doesn't know what to do with it. So, so the whole of that book came out of that moment's recognition from me when I was working there, that actually it would be a great way to overhear something that was, you know, suggested criminal intent or action.
That was a really interesting thing to learn to do, be a sound technician.
And I loved it. I loved it very much. I'm not nearly adept at it as my husband. He's actually done it for a living for a very long time. But I think, having been a performer, I'm working on a variety show where there was a lot of you know, singers and mixing singers' voices, and because I have sung myself, still do if I get the chance, I think I'm very empathetic to them. So they liked what you know, I could tell. I don't know if their voice had a bit of a strain on it today, and I would compensate them for that, because I would know I would need it if the boot was on the other foot. So I think that didn't make me technically perhaps very whizzy, but it made me sympathetic and empathetic to the performers, and so they liked having me around. Quite often I used to have to, you know, call up the stage manager or the musical director and say, this is happening and what do I do? So, and periodically you'd have wonderful moments like when microphones would just break down. It can happen for no end of reasons. Getting too hot is one of them. They can pack up if they get sweat in the mic. And we used to have emergency handheld mics at the side of the stage, which a very experienced singer would know. They would know where they were, and they would go and fetch it. But then you had to find it and mix it in. So that was always a kind of hair pulling moment that, you know, is this going to work, or am I going to blast everybody out their seats, or, you know. So there were some really heart stopping moments, mostly because you felt like a fool if you got it wrong.
Summer's just said that she messages me when she feels like that.
What, pulling your hair out? Yeah. I mean, it was a fantastic job, and I completely loved doing it, but unfortunately it was forfeit to the pandemic, so there we are. They've gone back with a different system now. And besides which, I'm getting to that age where I'm quite enjoying taking a slightly early retirement. I confess I am. Gives me much more time for writing, which is great fun. So yeah.
I mean, everyone has the odd technological thing, don't they? Look at the start of our chat where I thought we were live and we weren't.
Oh, bless. Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I couldn't do what my husband did for many years, which is to have a band, say like a rock band of 5 people, walk in through the door at 2 o'clock and do what they call set up the back line, so the bass and drums and everything, and the singers and the guitars, and he could set it all up, mic it all up, mix it, and then mix it live in the show. Now, I could not do that. That's frighteningly complicated to me. And it is technically very whizzy, that some of the things they do with that. So I would never claim to be on that kind of level. But I enjoyed working, and I love working in variety. It's an art that's not around as much as it used to be back in the old days when they used to get variety shows on the television and stuff like that. You could still see variety shows a lot when I was a kid. But it dropped out of favour, and so there are far fewer places that do it now. And the End of the Pier in Cromer is one of the few seaside resorts that still has a full season, 5-day-a-week variety show. So you can go 5 times a week, 5 different days, 8 times a week to see the show. And it's got everything from your dancing girls, you know, in their nice costumes and their feathers, and you generally have a comic, and the singers and the big production numbers. So, and I loved working on that because it's just bringing joy to people, really. Actually, it's pure entertainment. It has no point to make other than let's all have a good time, let's all have a laugh. And I think we need a lot of that in life, especially at the moment.
There's a theatre in Leeds called the City Varieties.
Indeed.
That still does variety shows.
Yeah.
And there's a bar next to it. They're literally attached. You can go in for your pre-theatre drinks and then go into the theatre. Yeah. And they have papered like all the walls with the old variety posters, and I just love reading them because the acts, like the names and things, are phenomenal.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And the people that have come up through Cromer, Bradley Walsh started his career there, for one. You know, all kinds of comics that work there, that sort of go on to do well on the comedy club circuit and things like that. Interesting, a lot of the people that I worked with the years that I was up there spent a lot of their time subsequently or around a season like that working on the cruise ships. So a lot of them work there now. That seems to be where a lot of the variety shows have gone, or production shows as they call them on cruise ships. So it's surviving. It's just not necessarily on land. Yeah. I know City Varieties. I went there occasionally when I was a teenager, and they used to make the good old days. That's how old I am.
It's still called the good
They
old
still
days.
call it that.
Mm.
Fantastic. Yeah, and the sort of Victorian music hall and things that nights they used to put on. My dad loved it, so we used to go a lot. Yeah, it was great fun.
I've
Great
not
fun.
been to the variety show, but have been to the varieties. If
Yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah. So yeah, and having that background in theatre, it was only a matter of time before I started putting some stories in there. But I'm kind of conscious of trying not to do it all the time. So the next book that will be coming out shortly, and I can announce that date tonight actually, is actually set in the Sainsbury Centre. And people who know Norwich, it's an art gallery, the Sainsbury Centre for the Visual Arts, which lives within the grounds of the University of East Anglia. And it's the private and personal collection of the Sainsbury family, i.e. the family that owned the supermarkets, or owned the supermarkets in this case. It's a generation that's now left us. Yeah, which is a fantastic facility that we're very lucky to have here in Norfolk. So I thought, no, I'll go and hit on something else that I love, which is art. So I've managed to smuggle some nasty doings into a very plush and posh and modern art gallery and teaching centre, art history teaching centre. So that's going to be book 4. Yeah. And my publishers have promised me today that that's going to be available on the 29th of June.
Oh,
You're hearing that here first.
feels like an exclusive.
It's
How many books are you planning in the series?
it's a good question. One my editor was asking me the other day. I'm working on book 5 at the moment, which will be a winter story. I do try to vary the season a little bit because weather can make such a difference when you're in a rural environment. Weather can make a really big difference to what's happening. And then I've definitely got one more in mind, which would again be a theatre setting. But I haven't sort of encapsulated that. That's just a suggestion in the back of my hind brain, that I know somewhere in a local theatre where I could easily bury a body and people not find it. So, so that may come along as well. So I think so long as I can keep coming up with ideas and settings, and the settings genuinely reflect the environment and where I live and the issues of the places, of rural places, then I think I'll keep going. So I don't kind of, I don't see it as a trilogy or, an oodleplex perhaps. So I don't know is the answer. I think as long as the ideas keep coming, I think I'll keep going. Yeah.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
I would like to read lots more of them.
Good. Yeah, so book 4, 29th of June. I haven't got a title for it yet. Being a former actor, I tend to work on quotes from Shakespeare on my original manuscript. So in the front of the books, you'll see that there's always a little quote from a Shakespeare play. And that's what's given me the idea for the title in the first place on my working manuscript. But my lovely publishers, Joffy Books, like to try and get some sort of sense of the place in it, and that things like the weather are very important to us, that we have big skies, these flat landscapes. So I've ended up with these sort of slightly meteorological titles like Under Violent Skies. And so they will give me some suggestions for titles. Book 4's gone in called Golden Lads and Girls, which is a quote from Cymbeline, but it won't come out as that. It'll come out as something else. So yeah.
You had a really lovely story for how you found Joffy Books. Do you want to tell us?
Well, Yeah, I mean, it's when we were on the course, we produce an anthology at the end of the course, which is sent off to various publishers and agents. And I spent a while trying to get an agent, and it wasn't working. And so I thought, I've always done a lot of my own publicity and so on. When I've been in theatre, I've run my own theatre company and stuff like that. So I thought, maybe I'm being lazy here, looking for an agent. Maybe I should do my own research and go and find out who I'd like to be with. So I did a lot of research and asked myself a very basic question: who do I like to read? And the answer came back that probably my favourite author at the moment at that time was Joy Ellis. And so I looked at who published Joy, and I researched them and thought this might actually be a good fit if they don't mind having somebody who's geographically sort of close to Joy. And they also have a lady called Anne Panketh who also writes about Norfolk. But I thought it's got to be worth a try because they obviously like the kind of books that I'm aspiring to write. And so I sent it off to them, and basically they signed me up in just about a week. It took them about a week to read it, get in touch with me and say, yeah, we love it. Is this going to be a series? And I said, that's the intention. And they said, yeah, right, let's do it. And so I joined Joffy Books. So it was Joy Ellis's fault, really. She's a lady.
She is delightful and seems to inspire lots of people into Joffy Books. I'm convinced they need to pay her a finder's fee.
I think they probably should. I think they should. I mean, I read almost all. Well, I think I've caught up now. All the Fenland series, and I listened to the Audible Jackman and Evans with Mr. Armitage. Who wouldn't listen to Richard Armitage? So, yeah, that's kind of how but that's how I found them. And I also, out of their authors, I also love Helen Durrant, Caledine and Baylis books. I find them very, appealing as well. And they're sort of set on the Lancashire-Yorkshire border, aren't they? Kind of. And again, that sort of gritty sort of. It's not a posh place. The town is a working town. It's run down, and it has its problems and its bad estates, and for some reason that sort of thing appeals to me. That I think it's the nitty gritty of life is what appeals to me, not the Chelsea on Sea set, of which we have a group here in Norfolk, of course. Maybe that's something I should look into.
The kind of posher set in Norfolk.
Yeah. Maybe one of them could be getting their comeuppance. Who knows?
There you go. Future planning for the books.
Absolutely.
Would you ever write in a genre outside of crime?
I have tried. You may not be aware of it. I can give you a little plug if you don't mind. I did a group of ghost stories. Okay, I don't know if you'd be able to see that.
Yeah, I've seen that on your Facebook page.
Yeah, it's basically I love reading ghost stories and ghost anthologies and things like that. I've read them for many years, and as a teenager sort of got into that kind of annual Pan Book of Horror stories that used to come out, and M.R. James and things like that. And so I came up with a set of stories. Each one is set in a different period, but they all revolve around the story of the Babes in the Wood, which is a Norfolk folkloric tale. It's set in a place called Wayland Woods, and near a town called Watton, and a village between a town called Watton and a village called Griston. So basically, each one of the stories, they vary in length, and each one contains a sighting of the ghosts of the children, the babes, whether that be for a good reason or for a bad reason, depends on the story. So sometimes they help people, sometimes they don't. So yeah, and that's Hobeck Books look after that one for me. It's a different sort of genre, and it's actually bizarrely not as gritty as my detective books. It's very
I should
much
find
kind
out.
of
I have just
eye-corner stuff, you know.
just hit download.
Sorry?
I've just hit download on it as we speak.
Fantastic. Well, I hope you enjoy it.
I do love a good ghost story.
Well, I hope you'll enjoy these. In theory, I'm going to do another set of these, which will be based same format, but based around another set of particular sightings. But I haven't got a deadline for that, so I don't get on with it. Like a lot of writers, if I have a deadline, I get on with it. Otherwise, procrastination is the name for what happens to me most of the time. So,
Where,
yeah.
where'd you get your inspiration from? From your crimes
Um,
and things.
I
You're right.
Yeah, I think they can come from weird sources. Actually, with Under Violent Skies, the first book actually came from the idea of what the crime gang are getting up to. Came from a report that had been on our local television, because this is a big farming area. They're saying that the National Farmers Union Insurance Company had said that they were getting a lot more claims, and that they thought it was organised gangs who were stealing to order and shipping things either out to Africa or out to the Eastern Europe. And whether that was true or not, it sort of caught my attention, and I thought, oh, so I downloaded this report from the NFU site, and I thought that'd be a bit different, because everybody, you know, there's certain subjects that get written about a lot, like drug smuggling and so on. And I just thought it would give me a different flavour. And the gang are indeed stealing to order in the book. That's what they're doing. Stealing Land Rover Defenders, which are highly prized on the black market, and things like GPS systems out of tractors and combine harvesters. They're worth thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds. I had no idea how much those things could be worth. And they sit in barns in fields and get checked once a year. When I need to use it next week, I'll go and check if it's all right. And it just seemed such an unusual thing that it just kind of popped out the television at me. And that was what started Under Violent Skies off. And then Brutal Season, it was the idea of how could you hide something in the carnival week at Cromer, and then the work that I did on the pier. And I thought, it's so busy in Carnival Week. It's incredibly busy in Carnival Week. You could get away with so much. What could I do with that? And then the middle book, Into Deadly Storms, was really about county lines, which is a big problem actually in rural areas. County lines drugs, and how could I make that. It does happen around here, but how would it happen? Who would be involved? And, you know, what kind of incident could I put behind that? And that came actually out of a discussion that was being had on Radio 4. I listened to an interviews on Radio 4 that sort of talked about how the girls were treated in county line stuff. So stuff pops up out of the blue and makes you think, I wonder what I could do with that. I wonder how I could work that into something that's specific to this sort of environment.
So what do you do kind of research wise? How deep do you go into research for like things like police procedures, stuff about county lines, things like that?
There's shouldn't read my history on my computer, that's for sure. Yeah, I do a lot of online research, but I also have a couple of friends who advise me, both of whom were detective inspectors, one of whom was in the Met, and the other was ultimately in the National Crime Agency. And they will go over my manuscripts with me, or advise me if I've got a specific question, but they will read my manuscripts for me and say, actually, this wouldn't happen. they wouldn't be allowed to do X, or this person would have a guard on the door, or whatever it is. And when their comments come back, so I'll send them a draft, and when their comments come back, I will adjust the story accordingly. Just occasionally, short of rewriting the entire book, you have to accept that maybe I'm making a mistake with that or this little bit of procedure. But by and large, I do like to get it all okayed with my two friends, because they're kind enough to take an interest and help me out. So I do like to listen to their advice. They don't always like my outcomes. So, because they don't always get caught in my books. Well, in one of my books, they didn't get caught. So they got away with it, the County Lines people.
Oh, what was the reaction like to that?
Bit mixed, but there's a reason. There is a reason.
I think there's a reason it's okay. I read a book recently and there was no resolution.
Mm-hmm.
So you sort of read the story and that it didn't resolve. And it just really irked me.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So I was like, but I think if I read a book and, there was a purpose for it not being resolved, it would be okay.
Yeah. Well, and a bit like with Joy Ellis's series, they had a character. She had a character, didn't she, that kept cropping up and giving them problems, and then he would vanish and then come back. And in the team, as it were, the drugs gang in book 2 are in the process of making a reappearance. So, but this will be in book 5, not book 4. So
that's really cool, because in reality, in like real crime, you don't catch everybody
no
straight away, do you? So
no, and that was the point. That it was actually the point was made to me by one of my friendly DIs, was that particularly when you're working on the bigger crimes, like the County Lines thing, you often don't get the people at the top. They might well get the dealers and the organisers and the people in an immediate area, but it's very difficult to pin down the bosses and the top structure. So if you've read book 2, there's a lady called Lisa London, and she's making a comeback. What will happen to her? You'll have to wait and find out, because I don't know yet, because I haven't finished my first draft.
So what's the most interesting research rabbit hole you've been down?
Oh, certain information about certain of the drugs that are involved. It's amazing what you can find out there, but a lot of the information that you find out about various drugs that are sold and taken, you can pick up from sites for people who are working with rehabilitation units, or here's information for families in case you're worried someone's doing this. But when you start to drill down on the actual physical effects of drugs and how they work on the body and things like that, you can get down some quite deep technical rabbit holes with long names that I tend to skip past and go, I recognise that word pattern. I'll recognise it again when I get to it, I hope. I'm not going to attempt to learn how to say that 3-part mega word, It's like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious drug. So that can be very interesting, and finding out about the county lines and reading beyond the sort of press kind of level of it, you get press articles in the various papers talking about it, but then when you start drilling down into the sort of police reports and stuff like that, then you can definitely disappear down rabbit holes with that, because there is a lot of information, and then there's a lot of information that you only get from speaking to individuals like I do with my lovely kind DIs who help me out and go, no, it doesn't do that. No, you can't have that one, it doesn't do that.
So
So
apart from your kindy eyes, who else reads your book first?
my husband, bless him, he gets to read the first draft. He's the only one that does. Because my system tends to be that I get a basic idea and I get a basic set of characters. And some characters are given, obviously, because Sarah and the team are a given team. And then whether it's the actor in me, I don't know, but then I start to improvise. So as I'm writing, I'm improvising. A character might say something and I go, oh, that might be, what can I do with that? There might be something interesting to do with that. And the book will kind of zigzag and zigzag until I've come up with something coherent. And it's myself and my friend who also writes, Wendy Turbin, we call them our dirty drafts. So they're really not for public consumption at all, but my husband tolerates it and goes through it with me. And I spend quite a lot of time with him. He reads it as I'm writing it, so he'll read a chapter a day if that's what I'm writing. And then I'll, we'll, I don't know, go out for a walk or be gardening or something, and I'll go, they can't do that. Why would they do that with that car? Would give it away. What can I do with that car? That car shouldn't be in that place at that time, and it'd be on CCTV. What am I going to do? And we'll thrash it out as we walk at the beach or whatever. So that's really lovely that I have his support for that kind of thing. And then the second drafts, which is the revised draft, then goes to various friends and readers, beta readers. And then when I've worked on their suggestions and replies, then that goes to the editors, that goes to the publishers and the editors. So it's quite a longish process for me. It does take me about 6 months to write a book, taking all that into account. Yeah.
And how long from then, that process of it going to the editors, would it take before it's out?
Between 4 and 6 months. Partly depends, sometimes it depends on the time of year, because I put my last one in just before Christmas, and of course then we all went on holiday for a fortnight, so that's inevitable. But yes, it generally goes through 2 edits, and I also have a sensitive reader go over mine, because I like to include diverse characters, and I like to make sure that I'm doing that correctly. And hopefully with respect. And then I have a final draft, which I've just sent back of book 4. And I'm now waiting for the cover to come through. That's always an exciting moment, waiting to see the covers. And then from that point, it's usually about 6 weeks. So I'm hoping I'll get the cover in the next few days, and then we can hit our 29th of June deadline to actually get it out. Yeah.
I'm
So,
going to read you a really nice comment from Sam. She said, "Thank you both for a great interview," because we've got 5 minutes left.
All right.
That's told me I'd love you, Judi. She's always right. More books to read.
Working on it. I'm working on it, Sam.
Like, it's very kind of you, Sam. I'm very rarely right. But in this case, amazing. Go and read I very rarely finish a book and immediately download book 2.
Right.
So Joffy Books have clearly done something right, because the last 2 books I've read by Joffy Books authors, I've instantly finished book 1 and gone straight to like Amazon and downloaded the second book. I've not read either of the second books yet, because I don't know why I think I will when we do like our crazy author chat interviews. I'm like, immediately, I really need to read book 2. So Under Violent Skies is sat on my Kindle waiting to be read.
Fantastic. That's fantastic.
When we calm down a bit for the other interviews, I will read it.
You guys work so hard. I can't tell you. And you know, all as authors, we appreciate what you do for us. We really, really do. You know, things like this and your appreciation is it's really important to us, and we're very grateful for it. And we're grateful to the club as well. It's such on a personal level, I find it's just such a friendly place to come to get advice, to find you know, new series to read, and to find out about what's coming along, what people think, and what I mean. different strokes for different folks, of course. Different people like different things, but I think you get some good, honest opinions without it ever descending into negativity and personal attacks. And I just think that's an amazing job that you guys do, keeping it like that, because it isn't always true, I'm afraid. And it is true with your group, and I love being part of it as a reader as well as being an author. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you. Finish us off with a reminder about your books and yourself, and if people can buy signed copies, tell us how they can do that.
I haven't really thought about signed copies, to be honest. So if you like the fancy little ghost stories, that's called Wayland Babes. Let's stick that to one side. And then we've got Sarah. There are 3 Sarah books so far. So Under Violent Skies is the first one. And then Into Deadly Storms is book 2. That's where you'll read about Lisa London and the County Lines gangs. And Brutal Season is the one that's set in Cromer during the carnival and on Cromer Pier, where you'll find out a little bit about what I used to do for a living as well. So those are the 3. Book 4 is due out on the 29th of June, but I haven't got the title yet. You can have a look on my Facebook author page, or you can check me out. I have a website called Judi Daykin. There's a surprise. And I announce stuff on there on a regular basis. I haven't got any signed copies, but I guess if people would are really keen, then if they give me a shout through my website, there's a contact page, then we could sort something out, I'm sure.
Have you got any events coming up in real life? Are you going to do any book signings or author talks? Or
I get invited periodically to do author talks, particularly for local groups, because they're so Norfolk based, what I do, that the local people really like that. I'm off to Crime Fest tomorrow, so if anyone's at Crime Fest at Bristol over the weekend, I shall be there, and I'm happy to sign any books to do with that. We're working on getting the books into bookshops, and so I'm hoping that once that sort of comes through the process that has to be gone through to make that happen, then I'm hoping that I'll be able to arrange some signings for those as well. But that will probably be in the autumn before they come along. But that'll all be on my website and my author page. So yeah, I try not to bombard people, just keep them up to date.
That's marvellous. And then all that's left to say is thank you. Thank you so much for.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's been great fun. And I hope you enjoyed Tales of Theatre Life as well.
I'm sure I will. No, those were awesome.